Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life podcast. It is an exciting day for us. We're joined by a great guest. But before we get there, Mary, how are you?
You know, I'm great today. I was reminded, I think, yesterday about the importance of, just being alive every day and being grateful for, health and whatever happiness we can see the positive in. So there you go.
Yeah, it's so true, right? Show up our best selves every day, whatever that means for that day. And hopefully we can bring more light into the world. So with that, Mary, I'll ask you to introduce our guest.
I would be happy to. Thank you, Laura. So this guest, she and I connected some time ago, and I agreed with her response that we were kindred spirits. It was such a delightful compliment from our guest, who is Lori LeBay. Without further ado, so she's quite an amazing woman. Lori created the Alzheimer Speaks in 2009 and co-founded Dementia Map Global Resource Directory in honor of her mother, who lived with dementia for 30 years. She's been recognized by Oprah and Maria Shriver for her work. She offers a variety of free resources to educate, empower, connect, and decrease stigmas, helping families and professionals live graciously alongside dementia. Lori's signature keynote story, Betty the Bald Chicken, Lessons in How to Care, is now a children's book that engages all ages. She's an international speaker. And Lori, welcome to Prime Life Podcast. That's quite an introduction. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first, thank you for having me on the show. I'm just thrilled to be here. I got into this space of caring as a child. I grew up in the 50s, and that's kind of what little girls were trained to do. But then when my parents got sick, I really got tossed into it. My mom lived with dementia for 30 years. My dad had brain cancer. And, I had no idea, no goals to enter kind of the healthcare space. And it actually happened when I was working in real estate with the senior housing that said, Lori, more people need to hear your voice and your perspective on this. You're not about doom and gloom and give me your money. You're really about how do I live graciously every day, supporting my loved one.
I think the word gracious is important here because for those of us who have had experience with friends or family members who have lived with dementia, it's an interesting chapter in life. And it is hard for a number of reasons, speaking from experience in a number of ways, and you never know which version of the individual you're going to receive that day or that hour. But living graciously, I think, is an important way to put it. And it's a good reminder to ourselves that it's a journey. So I guess, Lori, my first question to you would be, how do you help individuals who are caregivers who have found themselves in this role step into graciousness as they're first starting out and understanding what this is?
Well, I think first you have to consciously care. You have to really know what's going on with yourself. And so often we project and we're taking care of everyone else and we're ignoring ourselves. So I think in order to really become gracious, you have to accept all the mixed emotions that you're having. Like you said, it's a journey. And so I always tell people, as much as I would never wish this disease on anyone, my mom's 30-year journey with this was the biggest gift I'll ever receive in my life. It just came in a really strange package. But there are so many beautiful life lessons to learn when we consciously care, when we stop being task oriented and really become what I call a CAR giver, which is just caregiver pulled apart. And the CAR stands for conscious awakening of relationships. And the E giver is about the emotional giving, because we've all heard many, many times, it's not what you say, it's not what you do, it's how you make somebody feel. And if we can make that our top priority, I think that's where that graciousness comes from, because it also gives you as an individual, you're answering the why you're doing things. And when you know the why, everything seems to fall into place much easier.
Lori, I'm very interested in your children's book for a whole bunch of reasons. I love that you've done this because I think sometimes when we chunk things out for kids, we are reminded of some basic philosophies and emotions. So I'd love for you to talk about your book and kind of how you bring what you've done for children with all different generations within a family regarding dementia and Alzheimer's.
Well, it's interesting with the book because it came to me in a dream, and I really thought it was dementia specific, because in my dream I just saw this bald chicken and I heard the word Alzheimer's. And that was, the area I was in. And I kind of beat myself up because I did it as a keynote forever. And as I did it, I realized it was much bigger and broader, but I would beat myself up because I didn't get it published until this year. And what I realized was this is the perfect time for that book to be launched, because Betty's story, even though it's a children's book, it resonates with all ages and all stages of life. And it's a story of, I used to say, not fitting in. And we all know that that's an icky feeling. But Bree Brown just did some recent research, and she was doing it, she thought, on not fitting in, but she said what she found out was it had nothing to do with not fitting in. She said that's really not what people want. People want to belong. When you fit in, you're changing yourself and you're not being your authentic self. So the story of Betty is really about that not belonging and how it makes us feel. And there's little questions in the back that, we can ask a lot of parents and grandparents and even counselors and teachers buy this book to get, we're going to teach the kids. That's our thought. But the kids teach us beautiful lessons because they look at life differently. They don't have all these stigmas. They're not as skewed, and they just want to play and engage. And so their innocence, I think, really comes back and hits adults in waves of, oh my gosh, this is a new way, or actually an old way, that I need to start thinking about life again. And it gets people to ask questions like, what do I do when I don't feel like I belong or fit in? What do I do for myself? What do I want other people to do? And when I see somebody else struggling, what can I do to help them? So just some really basic things, but we can't change the way we care if we aren't conscious and don't have a conversation about it. So it kind of reminds me of dementia. When I first stepped into this space, nobody would talk about it. And, society, in my opinion, is in a crisis right now. We have to have a conversation about how we care for one another, the big picture, because we're destroying one another. And we're seeing it happen all over the world in all different areas. And it's really a simple, beautiful story that kind of takes people back, because they're not anticipating how this little simple book of under 30 pages is going to affect them. And the comments we get are just incredible.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned children and how they have this viewpoint that is just pure. And I have 2 kids, and it's always fascinating to hear what they ask or what they say, because they are not at all jaded. They have only their own little opinions, and little and not in a negative way, but they haven't been exposed to a lot yet in their lives. So they see things in a certain way that we don't see them anymore. So I think that that's fascinating. And just, from a personal standpoint, I look forward to reading the book. I raise chickens, so I'm curious about Betty, and I want to know all about her and, and understand her story. Something else you mentioned is about, the state of the world and people, needing to care for one another and getting that conversation started. I guess my question for you would be, from all of the resources that you offer, which is a great deal, and that's very exciting, what are some of the resources you offer that help individuals understand how to take steps into this process from any perspective? I'll let you choose the angle, whether it's the caregiver or the individual.
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. NASA insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
Well, I'm glad that you brought up and gave me the choice, because one of the problems that I thought that there was is that we were separating everyone. Either you're diagnosed, and if you're diagnosed, you're not included in the conversation at all. I mean, that's how it was when my mom got diagnosed. That's what it was like in 2009 when I stepped into this space. If you're a care partner, a family care partner, you were heard, but you weren't listened to. It was like, okay, I'll give them 5 minutes, and then that was it. But if you were, a researcher or came from an academic medical model, you were God. And I thought, this is ridiculous, because book smarts are great, but we need to have everyday, in the trenches, reality check of what's really going on. And so for me, when I stepped into this space, I wanted to create an atmosphere that used multimedia. It's at our access, so why weren't we tapping into it? And I wanted to raise the voices of people diagnosed and families. And I wanted to do that all around the world because, we think we're so different. And here in the U.S., we think we start everything and we're the head of everything and we're the first of everything. We are not. And that's okay, because we can learn from one another. We can share from one another. But I also wanted to of course, have the researchers, the clinical studies. I wanted to have the advocates. I wanted to have the variety of businesses, because one of the problems is people don't know where to find resources, and they don't even know what to ask for, because you don't know what you don't know. So to me, the separation, we've kind of overkilled on that. And we need to bring people back together and say, we are much more alike than we are different. And what I learned during this period is that what's good for dementia is really good for all of life. When you learn certain things, you can live your life better, you can treat yourself better, you can treat others better, and you can have more of a sense of community and not feel so alone.
I think this may be a good segue to have you talk about, Lori, the memory cafes and why they're powerful to families, caregivers, whomever, even those that are going through dementia and Alzheimer's. Can you tell our audience a little bit about that?
Oh, they are such a beautiful concept. I learned about those on social media, just through Facebook. And what they are, I hate to even call them a support group, but that's the category they're in. They are for people with dementia and their care partners to actually be in the same room and have conversation. And when I helped bring those over to the U.S., there was such pushback. You can't have them in the same room. And I'd go like, oh, where the heck do you think they are the rest of the day? A lot of these people are married or partners or, family and friends. It was just like, we should be able to have an adult conversation and not just complain, not just go to a space to complain. And what I love about these two is so often, and many people who haven't been touched by dementia yet will find out when it hits them, is a lot of friends and family pull away. And so people really feel isolated and alone. And these groups allow a peer group to grow together on a same journey, and it's a safe space. So I kind of say it's like a bowling league or a bridge club. You don't show up for the equipment, you show up for the camaraderie. And dementia pulls people together, but it's not the primary topic. You hear that, the cat's at the vet and they went to a tap dance recital or a football game, or the kids came to visit, or they went on vacation, or they had a flat tire. You talk about all of life, and then dementia just pops in because it's part of life. And I think that's one of the problems so often when someone gets a chronic illness. Everybody looks at them like they are the illness, and there's nothing else left but the illness. And that's so not true. And so these groups, there's all different types of them. Like I do one, and we do it virtually now. We have people from Belgium, New York, or New Jersey, Florida. I'm in Minnesota, so the primary is there. And anybody is welcome. Just reach out to me on that. But there are also a lot of in-person groups, and they are all different. Every single one of them. Some are educational, some do activities, some go out and explore. And they really meet the community need, which is one of the beautiful things that I love. Like my group said, we don't really want to do an activity anymore because I can do it, but I'm doing it as a care partner versus them really doing it. We don't really need a knick-knack. And we don't really need the education. We want the education, but we need other things to do on different days, Lori. So can you tell me where I can find those things? And then we can just talk. And the bonds that are built almost instantaneously are incredible. I mean, these people become so close. They can contact each other in the middle of the night when they're struggling. Maybe their person's up at night and they don't have anyone else to talk to. They can pick up the phone and call. And there's no question. They support one another through everything, and they celebrate all of life together. It's quite beautiful and powerful. And I just feel so honored that I ran across them, and I'm able to facilitate. There's about, my co-founder of Dementia Map, Dave Wiedrich, has the Memory Cafe directory for 6 different countries. So people can go there, and he has them organized by in-person and virtual, and even by different languages as well. So, and the libraries are starting to put forth an effort where they really want to get involved with these two to make them more accessible.
I love that. I'm a big fan of libraries, not only for the books that are in the doors, but the groups that they bring together and the community that they create. And actually, our library in town is going through a restructure right now, and they're calling for the community to say, what would you love here? So I'm happy we're having this conversation today, because this is another thing that I'm going to put on a Post-it and stick on the wall when I go there tomorrow to say, this is what I would love here.
Well, you know what else you can tell them is a lot of libraries are becoming dementia friendly. So our group in Roseville, Minnesota, and Shoreview and Maplewood started kind of this movement in the library system. And they, because when you go into the library, where do you look? Do you go to the medical model section? Do you go to self-help? And so they pulled stuff together and had a section. So many libraries, they're giving grants out through their association to become dementia friendly, where they kind of set up almost like a kiosk where it's easy to find. And then on top of that, Laura, what they did was they created kits like they do for the kids that you can sign up. So it might be a kit for Alzheimer's or vascular or Lewy body or frontal temporal. It might be for early, middle, or late stages. It might be for kids. And it usually has an engagement piece, an education piece for the care partner, and a music piece. But again, every library is doing what their community needs. So they're all a little bit different. So that's really exciting.
I love that. I just took notes, and I'm going to send that email as soon as we get off the recording today. But community is such an important part in this, and it's an important part in so many aspects of our lives. So I love that this is something that, again, you're bringing forward and you're helping enable this for folks. I want to talk too about the memory chip. I was on the website looking through the resources, and you have a ton of great resources on there for people. And I found it interesting. And for those of you who haven't seen your memory chip yet, and I'll let our guest explain this to you, there's some important pieces on it. And as I was going through the dementia journey with two of my grandparents, it was interesting to see them remember, not remember, and want to remember. So, Lori, if you could tell us a bit about the memory chip, how does one engage with it, and talk too about the journal as well.
Okay. Well, first of all, it was created because one day I wasn't a gracious caregiver, and I snapped at my mom, who repeated herself 45 times in 10 minutes. And, that happens to most of us out there. I would say 99.9% of us, we have those days. And the guilt you feel is horrendous. Now, one of the things that we don't take into consideration is chances are they're going to forget about it, but we don't. And so that guilt just weighed really heavy on me. And I thought, I have to do better. My mom deserves better. I had no right to snap on her like that. I just felt horrible. So I interviewed people around the world, and I interviewed both staff and families, because again, I'm about bringing everyone together, that we are more the same than different. And I asked them 3 different questions. The first one was, what do you want your person with dementia to know? And staff would say, well, I want them to know that we're here to support them. And families would say, well, I want them to know that I love them. But our words aren't enough. Our person with dementia has a disability, with their illness. Their brain, they'd say, is kind of like Swiss cheese. They just don't know from day to day where the holes are going to be and how things are going to connect. And so we have to use what I call multi-sensory engagement. So using the same tone of voice, the same approach, the same touch. For families, it's really nice even to wear the same cologne. All of those things are little pieces that, as they're struggling to remember who we are, can trigger that we are a good, safe person for them. And so that was the number one. Number 2 was, what do you have to focus on? And so staff said, well, I've got a job description, and family said, I have a to-do list. And I went, yes, I've got a to-do list too. And I thought, oh, I got this down. And then about 2 months later, I woke up from a dead sleep in a cold sweat going, oh my gosh, I forgot something in all of these interviews. And what I missed wasn't a word, but it was a twang in everyone's voice that said, with no words, this isn't how I pictured my life. And what I realized in that moment was that none of us, myself included, can be person-centered or relationship-based or put that person totally first when we have an emotional need. consciously or unconsciously as a human being, we are going to protect ourselves first. And so I thought, okay, I've got to approach my task different. So I went basically to the base of Maslow's theory and said, let's get simple again. What is most important? What do I really want to give this person I'm caring for? And it was three simple things. Are they safe? Are they happy? Are they pain-free? And when I focused on those three things first, I did my tasks differently. And that's one of the problems we have today is we have gotten micromanaged throughout our jobs, and we aren't relationship-based anymore. So that was absolutely key. And then the third question I asked people was, what do you want to remember? And the answers here were really interesting. Staff said, well, I don't really need to remember anything. And my heart just broke. Because again, they weren't trained to be in relationship. They were there to do a task. And families said, I want to remember the person who was. And that broke my heart too, thinking, hey guys, look in the mirror. None of us are the person who we once were. And we have disappointed many in our lifetime, and we will continue to as we grow and emerge. That's part of life. And so instead of focusing on what was, focus on what is. What is in the moment right now? What are they still able to do? And bringing that together, because when you focus on abilities, you're focusing on commonalities and you're focusing on participation and engagement. And those are the things that warm our heart. So that's really kind of the memory chip. I actually just ordered more bracelets for people too, that it's just a nice little reminder that safe, happy, and pain-free. And then the journal, the journal is really about getting people to not be scared to come and visit. And I don't know, Laura, if you ran across this with your family, but people kind of pull away and I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. So it's just a prompt where they can bring a picture or a story. And the story might be 3 words. Bob and Betty went to the burger place, and there's a story behind that needs to be told. But it allows others to replay that story and reminisce. And I found stories I had never heard that were hilarious. But, you know, as a parent looking at a child, they don't necessarily need to know that. But then as an adult, oh, yeah, you do. That's a good story to know. And so it was just really heartwarming to be able to hear about your loved one in a different fashion, in different relationships. And it opens up the door and it just brings joy. And it lets people kind of release that fear and say, again, there's still ways to connect. Even when somebody's nonverbal, we can still communicate using nonverbal language as well, or talking and just watching for that glint in the eye and the smile and, you know, the light touch or the kiss, whatever.
That's beautiful. I love what you just shared. And I just thought about a guest that we had on recently whose episode I think is going to launch today. And he cared for his wife, and he talked about how she was, and he wrote a book, Marty Schreiber, former governor of Wisconsin. And he talked about really a lot of what you touched upon, and just accepting, you know, who the person is. And without going into too much personal detail, my husband has a really good sense of humor, and he was smarter than I was the other day to use it with my dad. My dad had a moment where he didn't remember something quite right about my husband's father, and he used humor in his response. And it just was the perfect thing to say, and it made my dad feel like, I think, really good, and we all laughed. And so it was interesting what you were sharing about, you know, how people respond. And, you know, when we do lose our temper, or, you know, we get, you know, incensed because, you know, we're only human, how that weighs on us. And so I loved, you know, that you shared that. My question is, you know, how do you advise others regarding how they can insert things like humor or different ways they can, deal with some of what can be overwhelming or just, the patience is really being tried.
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Well, I think first, don't try too hard. I think that's one of our problems. We try to be so perfect and we take this so seriously. And again, it strips down all of our natural abilities on how we interact with somebody. And humor is such a wonderful, wonderful tool. And we use it all the time. I mean, who doesn't like to laugh? I mean, there's a few curmudgeons out there, but most of us like to laugh. And when you're laughing, you're not laughing at the person. You might be laughing at the disease and the quirky things that happen. Some people will start having like weird, goofy phrases, and they've actually written books about mom-isms or dad-isms, these phrases that really just melt somebody's heart, and anybody who's been through them knows about them. Is it okay if I share a story on humor? So this is about when my mom was approaching her end stages. She was living in a nursing home and she had to move to the lowest functioning unit. And I really didn't want that to happen. She was still socially engaged somewhat, but she really couldn't do much for herself. And when they moved her, it had been dark and dreary here in Minnesota for like 2 or 3 weeks, which is highly unusual. And I went to go visit my mom and she was in a 2-bedroom room. And so when I walked in the door, there's a woman, or there's an empty bed, and then there's a curtain because she was in a nursing home. And through the curtain, we had a bright sunny day that day. I could see my mom laying on the bed. Now, my mom's like, 5 feet tall, 300 pounds. So I'm just seeing kind of this belly laying on this bed. And I walk around the corner and there's my mom laying in bed with this big smile on her face. And her pants are tucked down to her crotch and her shirt's tucked under her boobs. And there's just this big exposed belly. And she is laying on the bed like Garfield the cat, just soaking up the sun. And you could just see how happy she was. And out of my mouth comes, "Oh, Mom, do I have to pull your bikini out or what?" And out of a dead sleep, my mom giggles. She opens her eyes. She looks directly at me and she says, "Oh, Lori, I don't think I should be wearing a bikini." And she went back to sleep. Now, what that moment did was, it's a good laugh. But I sat on her bedside and I rubbed her belly and I bawled like a baby for about 2 hours. And the reason I did was because that little sense of humor pulled my mom back to me and she said my name. She hadn't said my name in 3 years. And it brought us together just in that tiny, teeny little moment. But it was just a very normal thing for us to kind of banter back and forth. And so don't miss those things by giving up the humor, because you never know what's going to happen when you do it. And they're just beautiful things to be able to look back at. I have a ton of humorous stories. I've got to write another book one of these days and get them out because they're just really important. And they show how, like one time my husband, he was really serious. My mom had fallen and my mom's on the ground and my daughter and my mom and I, we're all laughing, trying to get her up. And Tom's like, "This is serious. We got to get Grandma up." And the way we got her up was just, it cracked us all up. But it was like, you got to let go, because when you get scared, they're going to get scared. And again, it gets back to that calm and comfort that we want them to feel. And humor is one of the most normal things and one of the most precious things, I think, in any relationship.
Thank you for sharing that. That was really a nice story.
Yeah, absolutely. And humor made me think of music. And you hear stories, similar but different, similar stories where people who are on this journey may not remember certain things, and then the music starts to play, and it transports them back in time or to a memory. And that was one of the precious things that we received in our family, is when my grandmother was towards the end of her journey, and she was, you never knew which version of Nana you would get that day. And my brother went in and he played her a song. And she was a pianist and organist at church, and music has always been in our family. And I still have her piano in my house. And it was amazing, because he went in and he played her that song, and she opened her eyes and she knew where she was and she knew who he was. And again, it was fleeting, but it was important, and it was connection. And it's a beautiful story that you have with your mom. And I love the Garfield reference, because I can see exactly what you intended us to see. And it's funny, but it's so true. It's such a powerful thing.
Well, and music is so important. It's kind of that Tony Bennett, Glenn Campbell moments we've seen on film, but everyone can participate. And one of the things I love so much about music was even my brothers could participate. My brothers aren't touchy-feely. My daughter would go up with fingernail polish to engage, because that's really an intimate thing. I would go up with lotion, because again, that's an intimate thing where you're touching, and that wasn't my brothers. But they could push a button. They could turn on music and they could get that engagement. And they were kind of blown away as well. And take videos of your loved one. I mean, I have several of them on my YouTube channel, and I've actually walked into conferences where my mom's on the big screen reacting to music, and people they're just shocked that somebody in an end stage, and again, it's all of our life, but especially in an end stage, how they can have this joy, and it's undeniable. It is just so clean and so crisp and just there. You can't ignore it. And it's a tool we all use pretty much every day in our life, but we really take music for granted. We know how it can change our moods, and it can do the same for somebody with dementia or someone struggling really with any illness.
It's so true. And as we get to the top of our time here, I wanted to ask Mary to share any last questions or thoughts you have.
I don't have any questions. I appreciate, Lori, you sharing the story about your mom. And I've been thinking a lot about my parents and kind of where they are in their journey, and my grandmother, who I didn't go into that, but that was her journey. That was her end game. And I wished I had handled things differently. I was, in my early 20s, and I wished I'd handled things differently. I wish I knew what I'm learning now that I knew then. So I think all of the education and all of what you shared today is really important. And it's also reassuring how things have changed. And, you've been a force of nature yourself, bringing these ideas out in the open. And I commend you for doing that, because I think that's really important. So I know, Laura, you want to get to your last question, which we always enjoy. So go for it.
Yeah, sure. No, I love this question. And Lori, it's interesting because you hit on it earlier without knowing that you were hitting on it. So you had said something along the lines of, when you know the why, the rest comes into place more easily. And the question I love to ask our guests is, what is your why? You wake up every morning and you do this powerful, important work. You could be doing anything in the world. What is your why, and why do you do this?
Ooh, I'm going to get emotional. It's because I don't want anyone to feel how I felt. I remember feeling so lost and so alone. The very first time I had to deal with this, I was 13, and my great aunt didn't know who I was. And she remembered my brother who didn't care about her at all, and it drove me crazy. And I thought, why? What did I do wrong? And nobody could give me a good answer. Oh, Lori, this just happens when people get older. And then I experienced it with my mom, and I saw people pushing away, and I thought, we can do better. And I really believe in the power of one, that every single one of us can make different choices and make this world a better place. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to help people share their stories. So mine is one of many, just like you guys. And the more we can create an environment that's comfortable, the less stress and the better relationships, and the better we'll be able to care into the future. So that's my why.
And for people who want to know more about Alzheimer Speaks, the work that you do and the resources you offer, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Just go to our main website, alzheimerspeaks.com, and they can access all our free educational resources and so much more.
That's wonderful.
There.
And we'll put everything in the show notes. But on behalf of Mary, the Prime Life host, and I, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the work that you're doing and the stories that you shared with us. We're going to link out to your resources, your podcast, YouTube channel, so people can really engage with the content that you're creating and share it across their platforms. And again, thank you so much for today's conversation. And I wasn't kidding when I said, as soon as we get off the recording today, I'm going to email the library, because that's one small step that I can take as a resident in my town that will hopefully bring comfort to someone. So it's important for us to each think about what's the one thing we can do today or this week or this month, maybe this help make the world a better place. So with that, thank you again to our listeners. Thank you again, Lori, for being our guest today. And we invite you to listen to the next week's episode of the Prime Life podcast. Thanks so much, everyone.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.